Get some!
All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian with you guys. Big day ahead, as usual. Trump accidentally confesses, and as usual, we've got the usual, wrongdoings of the people in power. So luckily, you found a show that covers it. But as always, we'll also give you a little bit of hope too. All right, Casper, what's up?
All right, well, pretty big story that broke today in regard to Donald Trump's indictment on the classified documents case. Let's get to the details. One of Donald Trump's longtime assistants has now come out against him and is cooperating with federal investigators in the classified documents case, the very case that Donald Trump himself has been indicted in by special counsel Jack Smith. Now, the aide said that Trump repeatedly wrote to-do lists on classified documents while she was working for him, okay? And that's according to sources close to Molly Michaels, who's the assistant who has come forward with these allegations. So as described to ABC News, the aide, Molly Michael, told investigators that more than once she received requests or taskings from Trump that were written on the back of note cards. And she later recognized those note cards as sensitive White House materials with visible classification markings used to brief Trump while he was still in office about phone calls with foreign leaders or other international related matters. So, given her tasks to do, writing it in list form, just that he happened to do it in the back of literal classified documents, according to Molly Michael. Now, the note cards with classification markings were at Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate when FBI agents searched the property on August 8th of 2022. But the materials were not taken by the FBI, according to sources familiar with what Michael told investigators. Now, for those who are unfamiliar with that name, as I was earlier today, she was someone who was hired by Trump back in 2018. Michael became Trump's executive assistant in the White House, and she continued to work for him when Trump left office. But she resigned last year in the wake of Trump's alleged refusal to comply with federal requests and the FBI's subsequent search of Mar-a-Lago. Now, sources close to Michael said that she actually was not present. She was not at Mar-a-Lago at the time that the FBI raided Donald Trump's residence. But when she returned to her office, she found the documents underneath, according to her, a drawer organizer. And she says that she immediately transferred those documents over to the FBI that same day. Again, this is all based on what she's saying. It's unclear if Michael notified Trump or others at Mar-a-Lago about her discovery, or if any of those note cards from White House briefings are among the 32 different classified documents that Trump is charged with unlawfully retaining. And Michael also reportedly told the investigators last year that she was concerned about how Trump handled recurring requests from the National Archives about said classified documents, about handing those documents over. Speaking to federal investigators, Michael recounted how by late 2021, as many as 90 boxes of materials from Trump's time as president were moved into a basement storage room at Mar-a-Lago, and how as pressure from the National Archives mounted, she and Trump aide Walt Nauta would bring boxes to Trump's residence for him to review. And sources said that after Trump heard the FBI wanted to interview Michael last year, Trump allegedly told her, quote, "You don't know anything about the boxes." I mean, wow.
Yeah, so there's a couple things that flow from this, and also one of Trump's former lawyers have turned on, and we'll talk about that in a sec too. So first is the flippant nature with which he deals with our classified documents. So if, again, Phil and a Democrat and MAGA would be irate. If Biden was just like offhandedly writing to-do lists for his assistant on the back of classified documents. Oh, here's our plans to invade Iran here and go get me tomatoes and bananas, right? Every Republican would be apoplectic in talking about impeachment, but for Trump, that's the bare minimum, okay? To me, the much more serious stuff is she says over and over again, he would have them move the documents in response to the FBI. And the FBI would say, give the documents, and he'd be like, don't give it to them, just move them, keep moving them. And we gave all the documents, the 15 boxes, and she's like, no, sir, there are at least 90 boxes, and you've seen them, and you've seen the pictures. So what are we doing here? And what you were doing was a federal crime. That's what you were doing. And so, look, we're only talking to independents. Democrats are gonna say Trump's guilty no matter what. MAGA's gonna say he's innocent no matter what. So to all the independents out there, how many times do people in his inner circle, people who got paid for him, people who liked him, who wanted to work for him, have to say to you, the guy's an unbelievable criminal. We couldn't stop getting him to commit crimes before you believe it. So in this case, here we go again. We don't talk about the boxes. Total mob boss move. Everything he did here is along those lines. And you've got to ask yourself at some point, what the hell was he gonna do with those documents?
Yeah.
Because I mean, this idea that he just kept them for memorabilia is absurd.
Well, I mean,
please don't tell me you believe that.
I mean, apparently he just didn't want to spend any of his funds on paper to write to-do lists for his assistants. I mean, no, but that's the thing, Jake. I'm curious about that as well, right? Because obviously there's a lot of speculation about why he wanted to keep those classified documents in his possession. Did he want to sell them? Those are some of the more nefarious allegations. Did he want to, use them to his advantage in any way when it comes to foreign business dealings? Or is he just the kind of guy who doesn't like to be told what to do? And
no.
You know what I'm saying? It doesn't,
yes,
by the way, it doesn't even matter what his intentions were.
Yeah.
He was in possession of classified documents. He was asked multiple times to return them. He refused to do so. In fact, he lied consistently about what documents he even had in his possession, and that's what led to the raid in the first place, right? So it doesn't even matter what his intentions were. What I fail to understand is how a man can be so incredibly idiotic to the point where he becomes his own worst enemy, right? I mean, 4 separate criminal indictments. When it comes to the classified documents case, I mean, mounting evidence of wrongdoing. Same when it comes to the election interference case. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. Own worst enemy. He doesn't know how to handle himself.
Yeah, because it's pathological. He has a psychological problem. He can't stop lying and he can't stop breaking the law. Guys, what Anna's saying might have some truth to it, that he was stubborn, and if the authorities tell you to send something over, you might think, oh my God, that's the authorities. I need to be careful with this, and I wonder if I have something by mistake that I shouldn't have. That's what a normal person would think. Trump thinks, I hate the authorities. They're not gonna get me to stop breaking the law. I'll show them, I'll hide the documents even more. So is that possible? Yeah, there's some possibility. But why does he have them in the first place? Guys, the answer is super obvious, but we're not allowed to say it for fair reasons, because we don't have the evidence on it yet, okay? But there's one very logical reason why you'd have those documents: to sell them and make an unbelievable amount of money off of them.
One other thing I want to bring up is, listen, you're engaged in, if this is all proven in court, of course, criminality by being in possession of these classified documents. He knows that. He knew that he was not supposed to be in possession of those classified documents. So why then basically engage in the sloppy behavior of writing to-do lists on the back of note cards that are essentially that are classified documents? That's how she found out that these are classified documents. That's how she realized that he was engaged in wrongdoing.
So that one has a super easy answer. Moron of morons. So I'm not just saying that flippantly, guys. So today, Donald Trump has a True Social post where he says, Biden is dumb as a rock. And in that same exact post, he says, the Republicans should use the 25th Amendment against them. The 25th Amendment is for your own cabinet. It has nothing to do with the Republicans in the House or the Republicans anywhere. The Republicans, by definition, could not use the 25th Amendment against a Democratic president. Remember that people were threatening to use the 25th Amendment against him. He never even bothered to figure out what it is.
Insane.
He could have been removed from his office, and his different cabinet members met to discuss removing him from office because he was so emotionally and mentally unstable. And he still didn't bother to find out what the hell the 25th Amendment is. And he's so painfully stupid that he writes in public something that isn't true about the 25th Amendment in the same post that he's calling Biden dumb. So is it surprising that a man of this level of like stupidity, like just, I doubt he crosses 70 on IQ, I swear to God, okay? So, I mean, just about as dumb a person as I have ever seen in public. Is it surprising that he'd write his to-do list on the back of classified documents? No, not remotely surprising. And for one more thing about the selling them, look, if you say, oh, the idea that Donald Trump, who loves America, would sell out our defenses. I mean, I'm greatly amused by that, but that's not what we're talking about. That you think that he's some sacrosanct. You remember, he had our way of infiltrating Iran's defenses. You know who Iran's #1 enemy is? Not us, it's Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia, well, look at that, gave Donald Trump millions and millions of dollars right after the election through the golf tournaments. And they gave his son-in-law $2 billion through his private equity fund. And they're the #1 people who would want that exact document that he waved around in Bedminster, that he's on tape saying he's got, and he knows he shouldn't have. So that is one of many different possibilities as to how he could monetize those documents. It's not just he happened to randomly grab hundreds of top secret documents, etc. Come on. And Jenna Ellis has turned on, and we'll get to that in a second too.
Right, before we do though, he was actually asked about the multiple indictments he's facing, including the classified documents case, during an interview with Meet the Press over the weekend. So I want to show you the portion where they discuss the classified documents, so you kind of get a sense of where Donald Trump's head is at on this issue. Let's watch.
A new charge suggests you asked a staffer to delete security camera footage so it wouldn't get into the hands of investigators. Did you do that?
It's false. But let me tell you what.
Would you testify to that under oath?
I'll testify.
You testify to that under oath?
It's a fake charge by this deranged lunatic prosecutor who lost in the Supreme Court 9-0, and he tried to destroy lots of lives. He's a lunatic. So it's a fake charge. But more importantly, the tapes weren't deleted. In other words, there was nothing done to them. And they were my tapes. I could have fought them. I didn't even have to give them the tapes, I don't think. I think I would have won in court. When they asked for the tapes, I said, sure, they're my tapes. I could have fought them. I didn't even have to give them. Just so you understand though, we didn't delete anything. Nothing was deleted.
Now it depends. If the authorities subpoena the tape as part of their criminal investigation, no, you have to turn over the tapes. They have been subpoenaed.
No, it's just guys.
Yeah, he just has a completely skewed, inaccurate view of how pretty much everything works, right? Whether we're talking about our criminal justice system or we're talking about our Constitution and the 25th Amendment. It's this lack of intellectual curiosity, but even worse than that, it's this willingness to essentially push aside what the reality is and instead implement what his worldview is.
Yeah.
And it's inaccurate. No, you couldn't have fought them after they subpoenaed the tapes, the surveillance tapes in Mar-a-Lago, because you refused to hand over the classified documents.
So look, nothing triggers me more than someone pretending that Donald Trump is intelligent. So here's the guy who thought the stealth fighter was invisible to the naked eye, that it was like Wonder Woman's jet, you couldn't see it.
I mean,
and he said it twice on tape. Moron, ask someone, right? And no one has the courage to say, hey, Mr. President, you're an idiot. It's not actually invisible. Radar can't pick it up, right? Because he's not only dumb, but arrogant. In this case, he says, they're my tapes. Brother, they're your tapes until you commit a crime on them. When the cops call in and say, hey, we think you might have killed your wife, and it's on your, the Ring video on your phone, on your door, right? You don't go, they're my tapes. You know, you can't have them. They're my tapes. Gotcha, cops. No, that's not how it works.
If the authorities have a warrant to raid your home, even though it is your property, you don't have the right to deny them entry if they have a warrant. I mean, he knows, he has to know this.
God knows what he knows. So, and then he says, nothing was deleted, so it's not a crime. Also not a thing. Mr. Trump, it looked like you tried to kill your wife and you shot at her, but I missed. She's still alive, so it's not a crime. no, moron, it is a crime. You just couldn't, you were so stupid you couldn't complete it. By the way, that's literally what happened. They ran into technical difficulties when they tried to delete the tapes, and none of them could figure it out. And finally, the guy who was in charge of tech was like, I don't think we should do this either way. I'm pretty sure the authorities told us not to delete this. Meanwhile, Trump is telling everybody, just go ahead, take care of it, right? So look, I wanted it would have been great if right-wingers picked someone who was a populist and was really conservative, and I would debate them and I would be mad, but wasn't such a pathological criminal. But nice job, right-wingers. This is your leader, super embarrassing. Finally, Jenna Ellis, one of his lawyers. You remember the ones that I was out there with Rudy and the Kraken lady, etc. That's Sidney Powell. So Jenna Ellis, one of the top 3 during the whole election was stolen stuff. Today, Trump's a malignant narcissist. I cannot support him anymore.
Oh, interesting. Okay,
yeah.
Was that after you incriminated yourself in the election meddling case and now would like to distance yourself from Trump? Or had that not happened, would you still be a supporter of Trump's? I'm very curious about that.
Yeah, so I got no love for the Jenna Ellis of the world. Okay, they're giant hypocrites, and now they're all scurrying about trying to protect themselves. But part of the reason is because Donald Trump won't protect anyone. He doesn't care about anyone that's related to him. He makes you commit crimes and then throws you under the bus. So Jenna Ellis didn't believe that. She thought she was going to be totally fine. Oh yeah, Trump really likes me. We're going to steal this election together and it's going to be great. Oops, it turns out we aren't going to be able to pull it off because he's a moron and I've been listening to this dumbest guy in America. Oh, the authorities are interested in this because it turns out you can't do a coup against America. And oh, Donald Trump won't defend me. He's got hundreds of millions of dollars, but he won't spend a dime doing it because he's so infinitely greedy. Oh, malignant narcissist. Thank you for figuring it out, Jenna. But again, MAGA, every single person that's on his side at some point goes, holy cow, what an unbelievable liar and what an unbelievable criminal. But I'm sure dozens and dozens and dozens of right-wingers, deep conservatives, all wrong, but your beloved cult leader is the only one who's telling the truth. All right, have at it.
Well, when we come back from the break, we'll share with you how Trump decided to incriminate himself on national television, having to do with one of these indictments, by the way. Don't miss that story. We've got that and a lot more coming up. We'll see you then.
All right, back on TYT, and we're gonna go to members here, but Louis Cypher starts things off by saying, Justice Eve. Ooh, good way of putting it. Yes, the book is finally out tomorrow. You crazy, tomorrow. We've been talking about it for so long. And I like calling it Justice Eve. I appreciate that. So of course the book is Justice is coming. You can buy it at tyt.com/justice. And Nebethit wrote in as well saying, whoa, that was a close one. I saw that Amazon delivery says tomorrow by 10 p.m. And in my area, that means I'll get it right around 10. But then I remembered I also use an Audible credit so that Jen can read the book to me, and I should get that at midnight maybe. Eek, I can't wait. Thank you guys, thank you for being excited about it. Been doing a bunch of interviews from left wing to right wing and everything in between, and you can go watch those interviews. The book is hard to refute. I haven't seen one person give one evidence to the contrary so far. So it's been great to be a part of it, and I appreciate all of you guys. And if that, when the bestseller list comes out, if we make it, that was you guys. That's your faith, and I couldn't appreciate it more. No one's read the book yet, other than select people, etc. For the purpose of those interviews. So you guys did that on faith, and I love you for it. So let's see what happens, and we're really close, but we don't know yet. So Shadow Hawk writes in, so after 30 years of fighting with a student loan, I finally got word I am free of it.
Yes.
Can I get a hell yeah?
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah, you can get a hell yeah. congrats. And by the way, you see me talking about tyt.com/dropout and all my issues with Biden, but everyone who got their student loans taken care of by the Biden administration, I say it to you every time, you should vote for Biden. A guy who delivers for you that much. There's a lot of people he didn't deliver for, but he did deliver for you. So God bless. That's part of the reason I tell you that is because politicians should be trained that, hey, when you deliver, you get our votes. When you don't deliver, you don't get our votes. Donna makes a good point. She says, please stop calling it a raid. It was a search warrant. Yes, I see what you're saying, that frames it in a slightly different way, but some people think that it makes them look more criminal, not less criminal. But yes, they absolutely had a warrant, but even with warrants, sometimes they're called raids.
Don't you need a warrant for a raid?
Yeah, it's just framing, that's all. It's totally accurate. Either way, Dave Schmidt 311, thank you for gifting the 2 subs on Twitch. We appreciate you. Let me go to YouTube members. Bach says, hey, hi everyone, I hope you are all well. I saw Cenk on the Hill this morning. Yes, I was on the Rising this morning. Some good productive stuff, some yelling, fun for everybody. Kevin Shea wrote in, I listen to the show while at the gym. Helps me calm my frustrations at what is going on in the news. Well, that's lovely to hear, Kevin. I appreciate that we calm you. Killjoy 100 wrote in, nothing this guy does surprises me. Unless he gave away all of his money to charity. That would surprise me. Totally right, man. The idea of Trump giving away his money to charity would be shocking. He ran a fake charity so he could get other people's charity money to go to him. We'll be back.
I did everything right and they indicted me.
Back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys, and a Florida Dragon gifted 5 Young Turks memberships on YouTube. So they're with us too, and we appreciate all of you guys. If you want to join, you can hit the join button below or tyt.com/join. Casper.
All right, let's get right to the next story.
The most senior lawyers in your own administration and on your campaign told you that after you'd lost more than 60 legal challenges that it was over. Why did you ignore them and decide to listen to a new outside group?
Because I didn't respect them.
Legal experts are now arguing that that moment that you just watched during Trump's interview on Meet the Press was basically the moment he incriminated himself and essentially countered his own legal defense in the election meddling case, which of course he's been indicted for both on a federal level and in the state of Georgia. Now he's facing those 2 indictments because of his alleged actions. And here are his statements with a lot more context. So you can decide for yourselves whether he engaged in basically incriminating himself. But understand that his argument, his main defense is, I was just following legal counsel. This is what my lawyers were telling me. Well, is that really the case? Let's watch.
The most senior lawyers in your own administration and on your campaign told you that after you'd lost more than 60 legal challenges that it was over. Why did you ignore them and decide to listen to a new outside group?
Because I didn't respect them.
You'd hired
lawyers,
them.
Sure, but that doesn't mean, you hire them, you never met these people, you get a recommendation, they turn out to be rhinos or they turn out to be not so good. In many cases, I didn't respect them, but I did respect others. I respected many others that said the election was rigged.
You called some of your outside lawyers, you said they had crazy theories. Why were you listening to them? Were you listening to them because they were telling you what you wanted to hear?
You know who I listened to myself? I saw what happened. I watched that election and I thought the election was over at 10 o'clock in the evening.
You were listening to your instincts.
My instincts are a big part of it. That's been the thing that's gotten me to where I am, my instincts. But I also listen to people. There are many lawyers, I could give you many books. There are books that are written on how the election was rigged. There are numerous books that were written on how the election was rigged.
Just to be clear, were you listening to your lawyer's advice or were you listening to your own instincts?
I was listening to different people, and when I added it all up, the election was rigged.
So there you have it. Donald Trump has a library with many leather-bound books. He's read 2 Shakespeare's and a Camus. But nonetheless, Cenk, he says that his instincts were a huge part of it. I think that's probably the most damning thing he said there. But he also kind of muddles the message with, I also listened to legal counsel that, of course, told me things I wanted to hear.
Yeah, when Welker was drawn up to question, given how much it's in the news and given the case, she probably thought through a couple potential answers that she could get. One was, well, I listened to some lawyers, but not others. Well, that would already be a problem for Donald Trump's defense, because that means, okay, so you weren't just strictly listening to counsel, you were making your own decisions as to which lawyers you would listen to, right? And already that would be problematic for Donald Trump, but you know that Donald Trump is not going to understand that concept, right? There's like two brain cells like Pong that go there, but I don't know if they ever meet inside his brain. But of course, with his verbal diarrhea, he wound up saying a lot more. I listen to myself, I listen to my own instincts, I'm in charge. Later she asks, are you in charge? And he's like, I'm in charge, I made a decision. Well, poof, there goes your whole defense on my lawyers made me do it.
That's true, I mean.
There's no ands, ifs, or buts, okay? I mean, you're totally screwed. The only way he gets out of any of this is he pardons himself on the federal cases and he gets MAGA jurors who are like, yeah, I don't care about the evidence at all.
In the state of Georgia.
In the state of Georgia, state of New York, yeah.
Right, where in Georgia he would not be able to pardon himself. Same with New York, because these are state level indictments. But if he were to be elected again as president of the United States, there is some concern that he would attempt to pardon himself. And he was actually asked about that in the context of this interview. So why don't we take a look at what he had to say about whether he would try to pardon himself if he were president again.
If you were reelected, would you pardon yourself?
I could have pardoned myself. Do you know what? I was given an option to pardon myself. I could have pardoned myself when I left. People said, would you like to pardon yourself? I had a couple of attorneys that said, you can do it if you want. I had some people that said it would look bad if you do it, because I think it would look terrible. I said, the last thing I'd ever do is give myself a pardon. I could have given myself a pardon. Don't ask me about what I would do. I could have, the last day, I could have had a pardon done that would have saved me all of these lawyers and all of these fake charges, these Biden indictments. They're all Biden indictments, political. They indicted, they want to arrest their political opponents. Only third world countries do that, banana republics. So, ready? I never said this to anybody. I was given the option. I could have done a pardon of myself. You know what I said? I have no interest in even thinking about it.
So I just need to understand something, because maybe I'm misinformed, okay? That's definitely a possibility. But for Trump to pardon himself, he would have to do it while he's still in office.
Yes.
When he was still in office, I maybe have the timeline a little bit mixed up, Cenk. But when he was still in office, he hadn't been indicted yet. Am I right about that?
Yeah, okay. So look, normal process works like this. You get indicted, you get convicted, then you ask for a pardon. Normally, no one ever asks for a pardon until there's a conviction, okay? So, but Trump has turned everything upside down. So then you would have to, in order to get a pardon, you have to admit guilt and then have contrition. So none of those things happen. My guess as to what actually happened, based on decoding the orange moron here, is that he invited lawyers to say, can I give myself a pardon? And the lawyer's like, no, Mr. President, there'd have to be a case, and you're not going to be president when there is. You can't give yourself a preemptive pardon for all the crimes you've committed, besides which that would look pretty bad, right? And we'd have to be awfully specific. We'd have to say, oh, for the national documents you're about to steal, we're gonna give you a pardon. Okay.
Right, he hadn't stolen the national documents.
He hadn't stolen the documents yet. Okay, so then none of this makes any sense. But look, his verbal diarrhea has one giant downside, but it has two accidental upsides. Part of the reason MAGA believes him no matter what is because all of our politicians sound like phonies. That's totally true.
And they are phonies.
And they are phonies, that's right, okay? So MAGA correctly assessed that, right? But then this guy sounds authentic. Why does he sound authentic? Because who the else would admit all those things, right? He just says all these things he's not supposed to say. And so they go, oh, then he must be honest. No, there's a difference between verbal diarrhea and honest, right? And the second reason that it helps is because he's constantly repeating. And in politics, it's all marketing and repetition works. So he's like, I could have pardoned myself, I could have pardoned myself, I could have pardoned myself. So when he says that, every MAGA guy now in the country is saying to all their family and friends, he could have pardoned himself,
okay,
but he didn't.
This is gonna seem weird, but it seems like I'm going off on a tangent, but it is related. So in regard to the Hunter Biden prosecution, when the defense and the prosecution in that case had agreed upon a plea deal regarding specifically the gun charges, Republicans lost their minds, and I actually gave them, I felt that their argument had merit, right? Because the argument was, well, this plea deal is too vague. This plea deal appears to provide immunity to Hunter Biden on any crime that he has committed up until this point. And that is just too much immunity. We're uncomfortable with that, right? I agree with them on that argument. I did.
Me too.
I felt that it was too vague. That kind of immunity is unacceptable. Okay, now think about it in the context of Donald Trump, right? So what would Donald Trump do if he were to pardon himself before leaving office? He would essentially declare that any criminality he engages in the future, any potential indictment he might face in the future, he is pardoned from. Just a blanket pardon, right? Blanket immunity. Luckily, he didn't do that. But if you buy his argument that he just made in that video, and if you think that he would be justified in pardoning himself before he leaves office, understand what that would actually entail, and then consider the double standard you are engaging in. If on one hand, you have a problem with Hunter Biden's blanket immunity, and on the other hand, you would have no problem with Donald Trump's blanket immunity if he had pardoned himself.
Yeah, so in that same case, I said the judge made the right decision because that immunity grant was way too vague and broad. Immunity for what, everything, right? In regards to Hunter Biden. But Anna's absolutely right in pointing that out. But that's the problem with MAGA. You cannot break through them. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't talk about these stories. One, we're in the news business, and this is massive news about the former president. And by the way, the current leading candidate in the race, period. He's now beating Biden in the polling, okay? And easily winning the Republican primary. So he is, right now as things stand, likely to be the next president of the United States. And so for independents out there that still use their own minds, how could you possibly do a blanket pardon for crimes in the future, let alone the crimes in the past? And when you talk about the crimes in the past, you have to lay out what crimes they are. So Trump would have had to have said, yes, we tried to do a coup. Yes, we did fake electors. I pardon myself for the fake elector coup that I was planning and already committed. MAGA, you really think he has the power to do that? And you really think he should have done that? And you really believe him when he says, I didn't even think about it for a second? Then why did you just tell us about the meeting you had with lawyers where you guys discussed it? That's not really, I didn't think about it for a second. That's, I brought in, either the lawyers just voluntarily came in out of nowhere and he's like, oh look, lawyers asking to talk about a pardon, which I didn't ask for. Or he asked for the lawyers to come in and say, hey, how can I avoid culpability when I'm a lifelong criminal and I broke like a half a dozen or 24 laws, right? So did that meeting happen? Did it not happen? Does he think about it? Does it not think about it? His contradictions are endless. But you guys always say, nope, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. I bet somebody else did something along those lines. What about this, what about that? No, he did all these things. He's incriminated himself now to no end. They'll be able to say in court, he said, here's the president on several occasions in that interview saying, I made the decision, I was in charge, it was not the lawyers.
I didn't listen to the lawyers that were giving me good advice because I didn't respect them. And instead, I decided to seek out lawyers who told me exactly what I wanted to hear. That was essentially the message, the implied message in the way he handled the questions in that interview. So we'll see what happens, but I just know the basics of what you should and shouldn't do if you're facing criminal investigations and criminal indictments. Do not under any circumstance do press interviews about these issues because you might say something that self-incriminates, and that's exactly what happened here.
And anyway, again, not bright enough to realize that he's incriminating himself. Like before you went to go talk to her, you didn't think for 1 second, hey, what's my top defense in this case? Oh right, my lawyers told me that I could plan a coup. And I could have people pretend to be electors when they're not electors and have them sign documents. And then we create a disturbance in the Capitol so they can't finish the proceedings. And then we have it kicked over to the states. My lawyers told me to do that. Right. You didn't think through what your number one defense in court is going to be? That's your number one defense. That's what the defense lawyers are already indicating they're going to go with. And so you just go out there and you blow your own defense? Come on, MAGA, if he's smart, why did he just shoot himself in the foot? Why? He doesn't think through anything because he's not bright at all. Please pick someone smart, please.
All right, let's move on to another moment in Trump's interview that I think is worth discussing, because this is a lie that gets told over and over again. And I think it's important to understand how the Capitol Police actually work. So without further ado, let's get to the next story.
That was at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, more than
I don't know,
3 hours after the
but there were
attack started.
tweets that were put out before that.
I want to know who you called
By the way,
on that day.
Nancy Pelosi.
I
don't have. Why would I tell you that?
Donald Trump was asked by Kristen Welker on Meet the Press why he refused to help members of Congress by deploying National Guard troops as the January 6 riots were underway. Now, his answer was full of lies, but before I get to debunking those lies, why don't we hear what he had to say in greater context?
You, as commander-in-chief, you have authorities that Nancy Pelosi doesn't have as commander-in-chief.
No, she has authority over the
Why
Capitol.
didn't you send help in that moment, though?
Frankly, just so you understand, I assumed that she took care of it. She turned down.
So when you realized that the National Guard wasn't coming?
Well, you don't realize anything until quite a while. National Guard not coming. I asked it to be there 3 days in advance, and she turned it down.
She says that request was never officially made.
Oh,
just
stop
so
it.
you know.
Let me just tell you.
Let me ask you about pardons,
let me
Mr.
tell you.
President.
The mayor of DC gave us a letter saying that she turns it down. Okay, we have it. Nancy Pelosi also was asked, and she turned it down. The police commissioner
I'm talking
of
about
Capitol
the day
Police,
of
wait a minute.
Yep.
Capitol Police said that he wanted it, and Nancy Pelosi wouldn't accept it. She's responsible for January 6th.
So let's talk a little bit about how this process actually works, because even if Nancy Pelosi wanted that kind of power, she doesn't have that kind of power. The Speaker of the House does not have that kind of power. So what do I mean by that? So the way that the National Guard troops would be deployed in a situation like this is if the so-called Capitol Police Board gets together and they unanimously decide this is what we're gonna do. Now, what consists of the Capitol Police Board? You have the House Sergeant at Arms. That's not Nancy Pelosi. That was a guy at the time by the name of Paul Irving. He actually resigned the day after January 6th. He did report to Pelosi, but Pelosi's not the one who's part of this board that makes the decision. Paul Irving was part of that board. Then you have the Senate Sergeant at Arms, the individual who reports to the Senate Majority Leader. At the time, it was Mitch McConnell. That guy's name at the time, Michael Stenger. He was the Senate Sergeant at Arms. And then you have the architect of the Capitol, Brett Blanton, who had all sorts of issues. We'll get to him in just a moment. And then there's the chief of police for the Capitol Police, right? And at the time, that's Stephen Sund, okay? So the board decided against calling the Guard ahead of January 6th. They had a conversation about it, they decided against it, but then they requested troops after the rioting was already underway. That is how the process works. So even if, by the way, there's no evidence of this happening, but even if someone approached Nancy Pelosi specifically and said, yo, we're offering you up 10,000 National Guard troops, what do you say? She doesn't have the ability to either approve or deny that request unilaterally. And I do find it fascinating that Trump is so hyper-focused on Nancy Pelosi, who's the person that the House Sergeant at Arms reports to. But what about the Senate Sergeant at Arms, which reported to, or who reported to Mitch McConnell at the time? Is he irrelevant in all of this?
No, nothing matters, guys. So look, the National Guard is in the executive branch. Nancy Pelosi doesn't have some authority over the National Guard. She has no authority over the National Guard. It's like saying, why didn't the mayor of San Antonio call in the National Guard in DC? Because he's not the president of the United States, and that's what the president can do, and only the president, in conjunction with this board getting their recommendation and following through, and a normal process that the executive branch does. So he says at one point in that interview, I assumed she took care of it. You assume Nancy Pelosi, who is not in the executive branch, took care of the National Guard, so that's why you didn't do your job? I don't understand how anybody believes this guy. I just don't, guys, come on. All right, he says she's responsible for January 6th. Yeah, they were trying to kill her that day. So she thought, oh yeah, why don't I just invite a bunch of my political opponents? In fact, the most deranged of them, the ones willing to break into the Capitol and murder me and Trump's own vice president. Yeah, I'd love to do that. But yet, go on social media, and what you will see from MAGA wall to wall is it was Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah, it is amazing, and it shows. Look, I don't expect anyone to know how this process actually works, right? And what you have here is Donald Trump essentially taking advantage of or exploiting, I think the general ignorance that most Americans have about how this process works. So it's very easy to lie to people and especially get Trump's supporters to believe that the person responsible for not calling for help from the National Guard troops was Nancy Pelosi. Of course, that's not the case. By the way, I want to give you some more details about what transpired that day. So remember, all of this had been investigated as part of the House Select Committee investigating January 6th. So Stephen Sund, the Capitol Police Chief during the riots, testified to the Senate panel that by 1:09 p.m. on the afternoon of the riot, he notified both Irving and Stanger of the department's need for a state of emergency declaration and National Guard troops, which was not approved by the Capitol Police Board until after 2 p.m. It took over an hour for them to finally approve it after the riots had already been underway, okay? Irving said he did not recall getting a request for the National Guard until shortly after 2 p.m. Now, after the investigation, some of the laws have changed, which I think makes a lot of sense. So according to roll call, in late 2021, President Joe Biden signed a bill into law that lets the Capitol Police Chief ask for National Guard help without the approval of the Capitol Police Board. And I said I would get to the architect of the Capitol, right? At the time, the person serving in that role was Brett Blanton. So Brett Blanton said he avoided coming to the Hill on January 6th of 2021. He explained that he thought it wouldn't be prudent to drive to work that day, a revelation that infuriated lawmakers on the House Administration Committee panel, which investigated this. Instead, he said, his official vehicle served as the agency's mobile command post during the January 6th attack, where he listened to police radio and directed personnel from afar.
Yeah, it was mobile because you were getting the hell out of Dodge when you were supposed to get in there and help. That is hilarious framing. So look, we tell you 1,000 times over, yes, Trump is a pathological liar, but the press makes it seem like he's the only one in power that lies. No, most of the people in power lie all the time, just not as spectacularly as Trump. I think one of our members on YouTube nailed this as to why he didn't respond. And people don't say this often enough, and I think it's exactly right. Night Eater wrote in, Trump sat in his corner hoping the coup succeeded. Once it failed, he finally spoke. Exactly right, okay? He sat there for 3 hours watching TV, hoping, go get him, guys, go get him. Meanwhile, we know from witness testimony, Mark Meadows, his chief of staff, comes in and says, Mr. President, they're talking about murdering the vice president, your vice president, Mike Pence. And he says Mike deserved it. And he goes back to watching to see if they're gonna succeed. And once he realizes, oh yeah, how could they possibly take the building and then keep it? The only people who could believe that are the idiots that were on the ground and Donald Trump. No, they were supposed to delay the proceedings, and then the Republicans were supposed to panic and the Democrats were supposed to panic and bring it back to the states. But they didn't panic. And once they didn't panic, finally it dawned on Trump, oh right, this can't possibly work. Then he comes out and makes a statement, oh, okay, I guess you guys can go home now that the coup failed.
All right, when we come back, Donald Trump has some harsh words for Republican lawmakers, not just Ron DeSantis, but also other Republicans, and the way they've been messaging and passing laws on abortion. So we've got that and more, don't miss it.
back on TYT. Let's go to YouTube Super Chat first. Dank Pearl wrote in, while I'm enjoying Trump destroying his defense in public, I think it sends a bad sign for what he will do when he realizes he'll be convicted. January 6th will look like a walk in the park. Well, you're not alone in being concerned about that. Now, even people in the establishment are waking up to that. Nicole Wallace on Friday on MSNBC did a panic segment about.
When doesn't she do a panic segment, though?
Fair, that's fair. But this is the first time she said, I'm now significantly worried about violence if Trump is convicted, etc. Yeah, to which I would reply, of course. They're gonna lose their minds if Trump is convicted and he can't make it back to the White House. But are we supposed to not do something because the Gestapo might be angry or the brown shorts are really furious? No, they're like threatening violence to try to get something done is sometimes called terrorism. Just so that we're clear, right? And I'm not saying Nicole Wallace was suggesting that we don't do anything. She's just finally woke up to the fact that, oh yeah, some on the extreme end of MAGA might be not adverse to violence. Really, you don't say. Okay, Rudy Rosales wrote in, justice is coming. Literally tomorrow, my Amazon app says so. Can't wait. I can't wait either. We're now calling this Justice Eve, thanks to Louis who wrote in earlier. Now, by the way, tyt.com/justice to get it. And so now the host, again, right wing to left wing that I've been talking to, they've now read the book. And even they're positive about it in the right and the left, which is kind of weird and interesting because it is a hopeful book, although it is pretty aggressive against corporate Democrats and especially against Republicans. All right, Frank Rockefeller wrote in, remember this is our resident conservative. Up front, congratulations to Cenk on his creation. And then he writes in brackets, price for profit.
Cenk's a capitalist, I don't know if you realize.
No, he doesn't know that because he writes in, hope to understand the logic of progressivism because it's still a mystery.
Progressivism is not synonymous with socialism, by the way.
Not at all.
I think people make that mistake, but.
Well, Frank, good news for you. Go to tyt.com/justice, get the book because chapter 2 is what is progressivism? What is a progressive? So you'll get to find out, okay? Am I not merciful? That, by the way, that's part of why I wrote the book. Nobody ever defines progressive, socialism, all these things are never defined. I talk about it, I define them, and I explain the full context of it. Okay, all right, let's go to YouTube members. Norm Wilson writes in, Jesus, US politics makes my head explode. Brother, you are not alone, okay? Killjoy100 says, will that be Trump's defense team's strategy? Blame Nancy. Yeah, good luck trying that in court. In politics, it totally works. MAGA goes, yeah, of course. You know, I told you the poll where a majority of Republicans think that Biden caused the riot against himself. So nothing can't, like everything works with MAGA if it just comes out of Trump's mouth. But in a court, you're gonna prove that it was Nancy Pelosi's fault, that there was fake electors in a coup against Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, and the government?
Should try it.
Yeah, give it a shot.
Yeah.
Absolutely, give it a shot. John Cooper writes in, I need Anna to read me a book. I'm all over that. Maybe one day, if we're on the bestseller list, I mean, who's gonna get a book deal? I don't know if she wants one.
My book's gonna be super salty. Like,
yes. Cenk, Anna, and Boss Monkey with you guys. They hit the join button below the video on YouTube. You can do likewise, become an American hero. Casper.
I like monkeys.
I like members.
But Boss Monkey, I'd be careful. Boss Monkey could do some damage.
Well, the good news, now they're now on our side.
Nice.
Because all members, you are the Young Turks. Without you, we don't have this, and we love doing the show with you guys. Casper.
Well, Trump had some harsh words for the Republican Party. Let's hear what he had to say.
I think the Republicans speak very inarticulately about this subject. I watched some of them without the exceptions, et cetera, et cetera. I said, other than certain parts of the country, you're not gonna win on this issue.
Donald Trump accusing others of speaking inarticulately on an issue. Now, in this case, he's actually referring to members of his own party on the issue of abortion. Let's hear more of what he had to say.
Democrats don't want to see abortion in the 7th month. Okay, I speak to a lot of Democrats. They want a number. There is a number And there's a number that's going to be agreed to. And Republicans should go out and say the following, because I think the Republicans speak very inarticulately about this subject. I watched some of them without the exceptions, et cetera, et cetera. I said, other than certain parts of the country, you're not going to win on this issue, but you will win on this issue when you come up with the right number of weeks, because Democrats don't want to be radical on the issue. Most of them, some do. They don't want to be radical on the issue. They don't want to kill a baby in the 7th month or the 9th month or after birth. And they're allowed to do that, and you can't do that.
Now, I would just like to commend Donald Trump for telling the truth about where Democrats stand on the issue, because despite the incessant accusations that Democrats want, like late-term abortions right after the baby is born, which is murder, by the way. There are literally laws on the books against that. Trump was willing to actually tell the truth, but not quite. Because earlier in the interview, he basically claimed that Democrats are extreme on the issue and they love late-term abortions and they want abortions up until the point the baby's gonna be born and even after the baby is born.
Yeah.
So it's like he loves to say two things at once. He does it on every single issue.
So look, we're burying the lead. I'm gonna get to the lead in 1 second, but let's keep burying it for one more second.
Okay.
So he says in the earlier part, sometimes they want it after the birth. Well, again, not a thing that's called homicide, and then they bothered to debunk that. No, there's no law or regulation Democrats have pushed for killing people outside the womb. Not a thing that exists, right? But he says that, then he turns around and he knew very specifically in the longer version of the interview, he said 92% of Democrats don't want abortions in the 3rd trimester. That's true. So why did you make up that the Democrats want to murder kids in the 9th month and afterwards, right? And why did you say it in the same interview?
It's just so crazy,
right? Like
it's so crazy.
He's inexplicable in so many ways. But finally, the major story here, Donald Trump is pro-choice. That was a definitive pro-choice segment. She asked many times and he answered many times, we just have to pick a week. We have to pick the number of weeks and then okay, and that's the answer. Well, if you want to say that abortion can be legal up until a certain number of weeks, that's basically the pro-choice position.
Exactly.
The anti-choice position is no weeks. It's a life form and you're not allowed to touch it.
Life
right?
at the moment of conception, which by the way, moment of conception, the second sperm enters the egg, even before it implants itself into the uterus, right? Life at the moment of conception, anything happens to that life, it's tantamount to killing babies.
And not only is, okay, if you say, all right, that is definitively the anti-choice or pro-life position, however you want to frame it, right? Life begins at conception. No, I've heard that for 40 straight years now. So there's no, and you could ask them, that is their position. But you say, all right, well, look, that's the activists, et cetera, but the Republicans that are passing laws are saying 6 weeks, like Ron DeSantis, right?
Which is effectively a ban because women don't know they're pregnant, usually at 6 weeks.
And so our side will say that, and maybe some people on the anti-choice side will say that. That's okay, I mean, it's basically a ban on abortion if it's 6 weeks, right? We'll take it. But Trump is not saying that. In fact, he's actively fighting against that. And he's saying, no, let's pick weeks, whether it's 15 weeks, 24 weeks. Well, if you pick 24 weeks, that is exactly Roe.
That's
exactly what Roe said.
That's exactly right, yes. Now look, what prompted the answer that you just heard from Trump was the question of whether Trump would pursue a federal ban on abortion. And in the context of that answer, he also discussed how, look, people wanted the issue to go back to the states. I helped make that happen. It should be left up to the states. But then he proceeds to talk about what could be done on a federal level, right? So again, kind of contradicting himself by even answering that question. If he genuinely believes it's a states' rights issue, he would have just said, look, it's a states' rights issue, let's move on. But he didn't. He started talking about what could happen on a federal level, and his views on abortion-related policy on a federal level is the pro-choice perspective. And look, this is what I think is actually transpiring here. You say Donald Trump is dumb. I think that in certain areas, he is not informed. He certainly doesn't know how our government works. He certainly doesn't know how our Constitution works. But putting that aside, the one area where I think Trump is actually pretty smart is politics. Just saw a headline right now about how he's planning on, delivering a speech about the striking auto workers, right? He understands that that is a popular thing to do. Lean into the economic populism, even if you don't mean it. In this case, he saw what happened in the midterm elections, the red wave that never happened. A huge reason for that was because of the abortion bans. It was because of the reversal of Roe. And what's hilarious to me is that as he's calling out Republicans, he's getting a lot of backlash from these anti-abortion, anti-choice conservatives because they're delusional about the popularity of what their views are. But before we get to that, one more video where Trump calls out specific politicians by name.
If a federal ban landed on your desk, if you were reelected, would you sign it at 15
Are you
weeks?
talking about a complete ban?
A ban at 15 weeks.
Well, people are starting to think of 15 weeks. That seems to be a number that people are talking about right now.
Would you sign that?
I would sit down with both sides and I'd negotiate something, and we'll end up with peace on that issue for the first time in 52 years. I'm not going to say I would or I wouldn't. I mean, DeSantis is willing to sign a 5-week and 6-week ban.
Would you support that? You think that
I
goes
think what
too
he
far?
did is a terrible thing and a terrible mistake. But we'll come up with a number. But at the same time, Democrats won't be able to go out in 6 months, 7 months, 8 months and allow an abortion.
What Trump just said there, despite all the backlash he's getting from conservatives, and we'll get to the backlash in a moment, was actually spot on in regard to where public opinion is on that issue.
Yeah, so and I don't think it's a matter of being smart or not. I think that he's a con man and he has been his whole life. And so what do con men do?
Some con men are smart.
Yeah, some are for sure, but he's a blunt instrument.
Okay.
So he just, and I wrote about this in my book, Justice is Coming. He would test along with assistants. They'd go on talk show hosts, or first they'd listen to talk shows. He'd have the assistants do it, and then he would go on with like Mark Levin and Sean Hannity, etc. And they would test 2 different messages because they don't care. He would have been a Democrat if he thought that was more effective, right? He would have been super kind and giving if he thought that was going to be more effective.
Oh, it's so depressing that that's not effective.
I know. So what they found out was what Republicans wanted to hear was, we hate immigrants. That's the number one thing that they heard back from those experiments, basically. And like he could have put out a pro-immigrant message because he's used undocumented immigrants his whole life on his real estate projects, right? And in fact, they tested it and they came back, no, you gotta hate immigrants. So in this case, what's he doing? Well, he's giving people what they want, and it's actually elementary politics. So he's like, oh, people don't want a 6-week ban, and people in America are overwhelmingly pro-choice. So then why don't we be pro-choice, but we just don't say we are? So like that's why he says, well, I'm gonna negotiate number of weeks, 15, 24. Again, that's the pro-choice position.
Yep.
So he's just saying he's pro-choice without using those words. So why don't the other Republicans do it? Good question. So the reason Ron DeSantis is going extreme on abortion, social issues, etc., is because he's trying to find room on the right to be seen as more right-wing than Trump rather than left-wing. Because if he's seen as left-wing, it's over. He has no chance of winning, right?
Yep.
So he's got to outflank him on the right. So he's got to go to these extreme positions to have a prayer of winning the primary. And then, by the way, if DeSantis or any of them win, they'll renounce those positions in the general election. And most of the media will come out and go, oh, that's a smart pivot. No, that's just a lie, right? But anyway, that hasn't happened yet. So right now, Trump is going with the more popular position, because duh.
No, but it is amazing, right? Because DeSantis' strategy will lead to even more failure. And to be sure, Trump has only widened the gap between himself and Ron DeSantis in the Republican primary polling, but they don't get it. I mean, it reminds me of the kind of campaigning that we're seeing from Mike Pence. I mean, put aside the fact that Republican voters who are loyal to Donald Trump absolutely despise Mike Pence. Put that aside. Even if that weren't the case, Mike Pence has largely campaigned on anti-abortion garbage. Doesn't bode well for him, and it hasn't been really doing well for Ron DeSantis either. Let me just read what Ron DeSantis' war room put out on X. New, Trump says he will compromise with Democrats on abortion so they're nice to him. Both sides are going to like me. Then he says it's a terrible thing. Babies with heartbeats are protected in Iowa, Florida, and South Carolina. He didn't quite say that, but nonetheless. Ron DeSantis.
But he kind of did, though. I'll come back to that.
Ron DeSantis, but they're not heartbeats at 6 weeks. Okay, anyway, Ron DeSantis will never sell out conservatives to win praise from corporate media or the left. But listen, Ron DeSantis, War Room, get to know voters in your own party. Because voters in your own party don't like the draconian anti-abortion policies, including the effective abortion ban in the state of Florida. They believe that abortions should be legal in the first trimester. Yes, even the majority of Republican voters feel that way.
So look, a huge thing happened today regarding Ron DeSantis and abortion. One of the top Republican donors in the country is given in the hundreds of millions. Pulled out from DeSantis and said, I'm not going to support him anymore.
Why?
Okay.
What happened?
That's because of the 6-week abortion.
Oh, interesting, fascinating.
Now, why, you think? Is he just, even though he's a massive Republican, he's just adamantly pro-choice? No, he says that's going to eliminate him from winning the general election. And you see the really rich donors that actually control our politics, the right-wingers, they're not actually right-wingers. They don't actually care about abortion. They used abortion to gain power so they can get tax cuts. So now that abortion is going to cost them power, they're telling all the Republican politicians, dump it like it's a bad habit. Who gives a goddamn what these religious idiots think? We're just using them as cannon fodder for our tax cuts, right? So dump their sorry asses and move on. And they're like, DeSantis, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you dumping them? It's not because DeSantis is open-hearted, it's for the strategy that I explained to you in a second. But the donor thinks, I don't care what your primary strategy is. I just care about winning a Republican winning the general election, because any Republican will give me the tax cuts that I want.
Right, and look, for those who are curious, what do you mean it's just a way of getting tax cuts for corporations and the rich? Just look into Paul Weyrich, who found a way to unite and galvanize religious voters through the abortion issue. But that wasn't what motivated him. What motivated him was the fact that schools that refused to desegregate were no longer able to claim like tax breaks and tax deductions, right? And so he was furious about that and needed an issue to galvanize religious voters, and abortion worked. But in this day and age, after having reproductive rights granted to Americans through Roe v. Wade in the 1970s, it's really hard to go back. Even among religious voters, a lot of them are like, I don't know, man. Maybe should be legal in the first trimester. Because yeah, people want freedom. They want to be able to make decisions about their own lives. And abortion isn't simply a culture war issue. It is an economic issue as well. Considering the kind of country we live in, the lack of support that families get in this country when it comes to everything from medical bills, our healthcare system, childcare. It's a big issue for a lot of people. And I think it's a big issue across the aisle, regardless of religion.
So what Anna refers to, I partly explain in chapter 3 of my book, Justice is Coming out tomorrow, actually, tyt.com/justice to order. And that chapter is called Why Republicans Suck. And among the reasons why they suck is because not only do they try to trick you guys, they try to trick their own voters, because they don't give a damn about their voters. All they care about is, give me the money, Lebowski. They're not investing $100 million into politicians because they don't expect a return. They expect a massive return. And by the way, even Trump is now saying, oh yeah, corporate taxes, I'm gonna cut them even more. So, and that part of the strategy is actually smart. He's undercutting DeSantis with his base. DeSantis's base was the donors. So he's outflanking him in every direction. But last thing I wanna say is, go back to the substance of this. He said about the 6-week ban that it would be a terrible thing and a terrible mistake. Well, you're just told all of the pro-life voters in the country that their position is a terrible thing and a terrible mistake. That is indisputable. You can go and watch the tape. That's what he said about the 6-week ban. So yes, there should be repercussions from conservatives going, oh, I guess Donald Trump was lying to us the whole time. And he was pro-choice the whole time, which, by the way, remember, he used to be publicly.
Listen, my prediction is they won't be upset.
Of course not.
Right. So we'll see.
But hey, you know what? Maybe good news out of this, because maybe now MAGA will be like, Trump said it. We are now all pro-choice. We'll take it.
Here, let me do a Biden and say, they were pro-choice anyway. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back for the second hour of the show, some pretty serious allegations against Russell Brand involving rape, and it's a multi-year investigation with some text messages to corroborate the claims. I want to give you the details on all of that and more when we come back.
Now I'm going to do something very different here and read some one-star reviews of the Young Turks on Apple Podcasts. Donnie Franchise said, pretty much it's like listening to a trash compactor. Someone else said, negative, anti-American propaganda. And others said, out of context, misquotes, typical leftists who are afraid to debate, just smear. These two would be perfect for CNN or MSLSD. Well, Donnie, you might have a point, because I feel like a trash compactor right now after taking in all those garbage reviews. But thanks for listening anyway. We are, in fact, unapologetically progressive. And if you're not ready for bold commentary, then we're not the show for you. On the Young Turks, we speak up about the issues that matter, and we want to make positive change happen. And now here's why we actually do the show. Mariel Morales said, found this podcast from the true crime podcast, Fruit Loops, and other great progressive podcasts. I've become an instant fan of the Young Turks. Great conversation, great takes, very well composed, factual podcast, very informative. Love to hear that. Z55 said, it's a joy to experience such awareness and intelligence from fascinating people. And Anna is gorgeous and brilliant. Apparently I'm just fascinating, but I'll take it. Paul for Progress said, news well delivered. Appreciate it. KOOK said, Democrats and Republicans are fair game for TYT. And if Anna or Cenk provide disinformation about anything, they will admit they made a mistake and correct it. We appreciate you noticing that we are honest. To people who actually listen to the substance of the show, thank you. Your listenership supports what we do. Leave a 5-star rating for the Young Turks on Apple Podcasts. Let's take the ratings back from the trolls. Everywhere you look, things are getting more expensive. Here at TYT, we understand this. That's why we're not gonna price gouge you or use inflation as an excuse to raise our prices. A TYT membership is not your typical subscription, but basic membership is still just $4.99. So what do you get for that price? For starters, you're getting exclusive programming, unique, exclusive designs from Shop TYT, access to a members-only chat, giveaways, emojis, and so many other amazing perks. But most importantly, you're helping to make an impact. As a TYT member, you not only help us do the shows every day, but you drive real positive change in the process. In 2017, we helped to start Justice Democrats right here on TYT. That's a group that got a dozen progressives elected into Congress. That's amazing, you did that. Your support also funds TYT's very own investigative reporting. Just recently, our reporters exposed the Fellowship Foundation and pressured lawmakers into boycotting that bigoted event. Isn't that amazing? We raised over $30,000 for Jackson, Mississippi, and delivered clean water to thousands of people in need. Our petitions, polls, and community of activists help keep the corruption of Washington in check. That's the impact of what just $4.99 a month from our members can do. And we're just getting started. Positive change doesn't occur overnight, but with your contribution, we can make it happen together.
You don't see a lot of news coverage in the mainstream media of the peaceful Black Lives Matter protests that happened throughout the country.
Black Americans are hurting. Minorities in this country are hurting.
We always talk about starting from the bottom up, but the problem is the bottom up is always the least amount of power. No one cares about them, and until someone actually cares about them, then we'll do something about it.
Please, for God's sake, America, understand, acknowledge, and work towards getting to a new reality where Black lives actually matter.
I am scary. I am threatening.
I'm Darth Vader.
TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys, and also Mike in Arizona. We do the show together. Thanks for joining, Mike. We appreciate you, brother. Everybody can do it at tyt.com/join, and it is Justice Eve. Justice is coming out tomorrow, so justice will arrive tomorrow. tyt.com/justice to buy a book. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
So, Cenk, someone had a title suggestion for a book that I might write.
Oh yeah, you want to hear that? I like that one a lot.
Of course I do.
Yeah, of course. So there's a number of suggestions. I'll read one for you in the break too, but here's one. Coming soon, No Cookies for You, written by Anna Kasparian.
I do like that one.
And that's Aaron's Western Assault. He's a YouTube member. Here's one from Twitch. Designer Dragon M writes in, Anna's book will be titled, I Don't Care About Your Goddamn Religion, okay? Or I'm So Tired, Seasoned with Salt. Okay, so we thought of salty stew. There's a lot of things that Anna's book can go. Yes. But look, guys, my theory is if you guys put me on the bestseller list and it would be all you, right? Then we did it. And then what will happen next is all of a sudden people will reach out to Anna, John, so many other people here and go, oh, we meant to give you a book offer. Of course, we've been trying to give you one for months. And so thank you for picking up the call. That's usually how it works, right? Yep. So we'll see what happens. tyt.com/justice. You guys are awesome. Casper.
Well, comedian Russell Brand is facing some serious allegations, and there's a lot to get to. So let's talk about it.
Sex, the love of it, the dogged, unashamed pursuit of it. Russell Brand's thing, the core of his act, an act which made him one of Britain's best-known comedians and actors. It saw him become the host of Channel 4's Big Brother spin-off.
Welcome to Big Brother's E-Forum.
One of the stars of BBC Radio. It even took him to Hollywood. Now tonight, off stage, it sees him accused of rape, sexual assault, controlling and abusive behaviour, uncovered in a major investigation by Channel 4 Dispatches, The Times and The Sunday Times.
That's right, comedian Russell Brand has been accused of rape and sexual assault by multiple women, and that's according to a multi-year investigation and a report put out by The Times and the UK's Sunday Times. Now, he's also accused of grooming and inappropriate behavior toward women he worked with, and we'll talk a little bit about whether it made sense to include some of these, allegations in a story having very serious allegations about rape included. But before we get to that, let's get to the exact details here. So on Friday, prior to this report coming out, Brand tried to essentially get ahead of the story by putting out a video of his own, denying the accusations, and I would argue making some excuses for why he's being attacked. So let's take a look at that, and then we'll detail the allegations.
I've received two extremely disturbing letters, or a letter and an email, one from a mainstream media TV company, one from a newspaper, listing a litany of extremely egregious and aggressive attacks, as well as some pretty stupid stuff like my community festival should be stopped, that I shouldn't be able to attack mainstream media narratives on this channel. But amidst this litany of astonishing, rather baroque attacks are some very serious allegations that I absolutely refute. These allegations pertain to the time when I was working in the mainstream, when I was in the newspapers all the time, when I was in the movies, and as I've written about extensively in my books, I was very, very promiscuous. Now, during that time of promiscuity, the relationships I had were absolutely always consensual. I was always transparent about that then, almost too transparent. And I'm being transparent about it now as well. And to see that transparency metastasized into something criminal that I absolutely deny makes me question, is there another agenda at play?
So he's really presenting himself as someone who's being targeted because of his anti-establishment takes, and more importantly, his suspicion toward the coronavirus vaccine, his negative commentary and coverage of the vaccine. So make of that what you may, but we're going to move on to the details and then you can judge for yourselves. I want to start off with a woman who's identified as Alice. That's not her actual name. It's a pseudonym that they used for her. Her allegations, I would argue, are some of the most serious. She says that she engaged in a sexual relationship with Russell Brand when she was 16 years old. Now in the UK, the age of consent is 16 years old. Here in the United States, in most states, it's about 18. In some states, it's as young as 16. But in the UK, it's important to understand that the age wasn't the issue here, even though I'm uncomfortable with an older man dating a 16-year-old. With that said, though, it's not that they dated, it's what he did allegedly as they were dating. So he had approached her while she was out shopping. She was shopping at a store called Topshop. He bumps into her, looks at the clothing that she bought, and basically said, "You're gonna wear this when you go out on a date with me," okay? And then this is what happened. Although Alice was over the age of consent in the UK, she and a family member both described Brand's behavior as grooming. Alice says he suggested how she could deceive her parents into allowing her to visit him, and claims that he gave her scripts on how to lie to them. She also alleges that he told her not to trust her friends and that they would all be looking to make money from it if she revealed she was seeing him. It was isolating, she said. Now, once Brand sent a car to her school to basically take her out of lessons and take her to his home, as her taxi approached Brand's home, Alice remembers the driver allegedly begging her not to go inside. She says the driver replied that his daughter was the same age and entreated Alice, "Please, I'm asking you not to go in there. You could be my little girl and I would want someone to do this for her." He offered to take her home without charge, but Alice insisted she was fine. He had such a sad look in his eyes, she recalls. Now, she was a virgin at the time. She also alleges that he was kind of obsessed with that, obsessed with her so-called purity. But now let's get to some of the violent allegations that she made, okay? Alice alleges that Brand forced his penis down her throat, and Channel 4 had an actor portray the woman recounting the assault. So what you're about to watch is not Alice herself, but an actress basically portraying or recounting the alleged assault. Let's watch.
I was pushing him away, and he wasn't backing off at all. And so I ended up having to punch him really hard in the stomach to get him off. And then finally
Okay. So there's more, Cenk. Other women, other allegations. What do you think about what you've heard so far?
Yeah. So first, let me state, I don't know if this is a bias or not, perspective. So I interviewed Russell Brand back when he was a progressive and really liked him. Now he's taking a bit of a right-wing turn and a misinformation turn that I really don't like. I'm just telling you that in case it affects my opinion either way, okay? But I don't think that it does. I got no dog in this fight. So when I look at the information, first of all, I'm gonna say that I think that they putting tons of superfluous information in these charges is not helpful, okay? It's not helpful to the women's causes. It's not helpful in if you wanna say that Russell Brand did these things, and there seems to be very significant evidence of that, which we're gonna get to in a second, okay? But like they had details like he raised his arms in the middle of intercourse as if he had declared victory or something. Why are we interpreting his arm movements in the middle of sex?
It dilutes
it. Exactly.
Yeah, it dilutes the serious accusations. I agree with you on that. In reading the reports, I feel like they mixed in a lot of stuff that kind of like buries the more serious rape allegations, which I think need to be the focal point.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's going to go to my main point in a second. But what they don't realize is how much it helps Russell Brand. So I mean, if he's guilty, as you're about to see some of the allegations, you don't necessarily want to help him, right? But here, when they say like he was more flirtatious in the beginning of the relationship and less so later. Okay, and I didn't like the way we broke up. When men read those things, they think, he didn't do it, because that's what happens in a relationship. Now you're complaining about that. So those details are not helpful. They're the exact opposite. Okay, so now I will say why now is an interesting question, and that does not affect whether he did it or not. So we're gonna break those two things up into two different categories, okay? So first, let's give you the serious stuff, then we'll discuss why now.
Okay, one thing that I think is really important to keep in mind, especially if you're an American, if you're living in America, defamation lawsuits are very, very difficult to win in the context of the United States. they're far more easy to win in places like the UK. And I say that because this was a multi-year investigation. It didn't just pop up out of nowhere. And my sense is that the reporters in this case wanted to cross their T's and dot their I's because they know Russell Brand is likely to be very litigious on this issue, and they don't want to get accused of defamation or put themselves in a situation in which Russell Brand could win a defamation case against them. That is my read of it. But with that said, let me give you more details. Before we move off Alice's allegations, she also alleged that in a separate instance, Russell Brand removed the condom during sex without her knowing about it. And then she said that she decided to speak out because she now believes that she was too young to be able to consent to a relationship with an adult man. Now, again, there's the law, which indicates in the UK that 16 is the age of consent. And then there's how she felt about it. And she feels that she was too young to be able to consent to that relationship. Now let's move on to Nadia, another woman, another pseudonym, and I want to get to her allegations. Now, she met Russell Brand back in 2012, and they met in Los Angeles. They had consensual sex at first, but the following month, Nadia alleges that he assaulted her. Let's watch.
He pushed me up against the wall. I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, I have a friend here and I want you to come into the bedroom. I'm like, no, that's not happening. We're not doing that. And I tried to get away from him. And at this point, he's grabbing at my underwear, pulling it to the side. I'm telling him to get off me and he won't get off. And he has that glazed look in his eye again. I was very distraught, trying to get out of the house with him being so much taller than me, like holding me up against the wall, pushing himself in me. I couldn't move.
That same day, Nadia went to a local rape treatment center to report what had happened. She underwent tests, was given antibiotics and emergency contraception.
I mean, that's documented. Okay, that's documented. So that's corroborating evidence. Nadia told a close friend what had happened. Her friend then took her to the rape treatment center at UCLA Santa Monica Medical Center that same day. So as you saw in the video, that was documented, but there's further corroborating evidence. So text messages show that in the hours after leaving his house, she told Brand that she had been scared by him and felt taken advantage of, adding, quote, "When a girl says no, it means no." Brand replied saying he was very sorry.
Yeah, so there he is on text. You can argue that that's confirming it. I'm sure he'll argue in court if they ever go to court. No, I meant I'm sorry for other things, right, but not that. And some guys will think, well, they were in a relationship before. No, brothers, you do not get to rape a woman afterwards and go, well, we were at some point in a relationship. That's not how it works.
So let's get to the third woman, dubbed Phoebe, another pseudonym. And it's important to keep in mind, none of the women identified themselves through their actual names. So Phoebe claims that Brand sexually assaulted her while she worked with him in Los Angeles. She says she met Russell Brand at an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting before they started working together, and that she had a brief relationship with him, which had ended by the time of the alleged attack, which allegedly took place in early 2013. Now, she was at his house working on a project when she realized that a member of his staff had gone out and the two of them were left alone. She describes being trapped in a bedroom and realizing that Brand wanted to have sex with her. He allegedly got naked and started chasing her. She claims he grabbed me and got me on the bed. She claims he tried to kiss her and remove her clothes as he pinned her down. Phoebe says, quote, "And I saw something come over his eyes, I swear to God, like black. His eyes had no more color, they were black, like the devil, like a different person literally entered his body," end quote. She was fully clothed at the time. "I was screaming and I was like, what are you doing? Stop, please, you're my friend. I love you, please don't do this. I don't want to do this." I think he had his hands down my trousers, but I was fighting so hard and I was screaming so hard, hoping that I could get through somehow. I don't know what the actual definition of sexual assault is, but it feels like that. He didn't rape me. She says that she kept begging him to get off her and eventually he relented, at which point she says he flipped and was super angry. Phoebe says Brand was shouting, "F you," and "You're fired." And she says she fled Brand's home in tears, stopping only to grab her shoes before running barefoot to her car.
If you're super mad at Roger Ailes and Bill O'Reilly, et cetera, that use their power in the office at Fox News to do this to women, obviously you should be at least as equally angry at Russell Brand if these allegations prove to be true. To which I would say the most important part to me is, okay, charge him. So charge him, prove it in court, and go get him. So that doesn't mean that I think, okay, I'm positive I know what happened in those rooms, and I'm positive that I would convict him if I was on the jury. No, they're gonna have to prove it in court if they go to court, right? And so the texts and the police reports are pretty devastating evidence, right? And the testimony of these women so far and some of the things that we've read you are clearly devastating. So now, why now? I think both things are possible. And so he did all this stuff when he was a megastar, and as he pointed out, part of basically what is in essence mainstream media, right? So why didn't they investigate him back then? So one of the things that I looked at was, how did this whole thing start? And they explain in one of the stories, they say, reporters have been looking into him aggressively. Okay, I mean, I'd like to know more details. If the women came up to the reporters and said, I need this investigated, then yes, they should definitely do that and they should be as aggressive as possible, et cetera. But if they went looking for women, that doesn't mean he didn't do it, right? But why didn't they go looking for women when he was a star on mainstream media, when he was actually doing these things? So
I think it's a moot point, honestly, I really do. I really think it's a moot point.
I don't think it's moot at all.
You want to know something? If you don't want to face terrible news reports and documentaries and potential criminal charges in regard to rape as an anti-establishment, firebrand, maybe don't rape anyone.
Yeah.
Maybe that.
So Anna, I totally agree with you when it comes to individual culpability. So in the case of Russell Brand, it's moot as in, who cares? Did he do it or did he not do it, right?
Right, that's all that matters to me, at least.
But to me, there's a second component of the story that has nothing to do with Russell Brand. That has to do with how mainstream media reacts to certain stories. So if someone is in power and is making them money, they do not investigate them. They do not do that, okay? And if someone's annoying them or is an outsider or says things they don't like, all of a sudden, they said they went and talked to hundreds of women that he's been with and they got these 4, right? So that's why I'm asking, did the women come to you? In which case, great job on the reporting. I'm being like 100% great job, right? If they went and interviewed hundreds of women looking for 4 women or however many women that'll testify against them, that's weird. So, and I'm not worried about Russell Brand. I'm worried about, is this what they systematically do? And so, and I think that it's not a conspiracy, guys. It's not a conspiracy. There's no one, the deep state is not telling Channel 4 in UK. Which deep state, right? I don't want people to mistake what I'm saying. It's just that there's a group thing with editors. If someone is an outsider and has no power, let's go try to find something wrong with them. If someone is powerful and inside the system, let's not try to find anything wrong with them. In fact, if someone brings us something, be super skeptical about it. And you saw that with the allegations against Biden back in 2020. When there was
Cenk, but you're conflating US media with media in the UK, which works a little differently. I'm not saying that they don't ever use media in a politically motivated way, but the laws are different in the UK. Defamation laws are a lot looser in the UK compared to the United States. I just think that in this particular case, regardless of how the investigation by the reporters were spurred, this has been going on for multiple years. Apparently, Russell Brand's behavior has been an open secret for quite some time.
Then what? I agree with you. So
do you want them to do their due diligence or not?
No,
right?
no,
Because in the UK, what we have in the UK is reporters just throwing up any allegation they hear from anyone without doing their due diligence. The Aziz Ansari story is a perfect example. Aziz Ansari, the woman who went on a date with Aziz Ansari, went on a bad date. That's not rape. It's not. But during the Me Too era, our media here in the US tried to pass that off as if it's the equivalent of what Jeffrey Epstein was up to. It was disgusting, okay? So I would prefer a multi-year investigation where they corroborate the story, where they cross their T's and dot their I's, rather than just throw out this allegation without doing their due diligence.
No, no one in the world, certainly not me, is arguing that they shouldn't have done due diligence. Of course they should. What I'm asking is the exact opposite question.
By the way,
hold on, let me finish the thought.
By the way, the investigation into this began before Russell Brand started questioning the vaccine. Just keep that in mind.
Okay, that's super relevant, by the way.
Super relevant.
Okay, but still an outsider, etc. Anna, what I'm saying, asking, hold on. What I'm asking is, if it was such an open secret that Russell Brand was doing this when he was a big star, why didn't you investigate then? Women didn't matter back then? No, he's making everybody money. You don't investigate him then. The minute he steps outside of the money-making machine, let's go get the son of a bitch. Right? So let's make up our minds. Do we care about it or don't we care about it? If you care about it, you should do it equally to everyone. So I don't know the intricacies of UK media anywhere near as well as I know American media. So I don't know what their situation is as much. And look, guys, it's a thorough, super detailed reporting of it. And they found something that is very bad and that Russell Brand should be held accountable for. Accountable means you try him and you see if you can convict him in court. Do you have enough evidence for that, okay? So good journalism on that. I'm not asking you to not do that journalism. I'm asking you to do that journalism when people are in power and you're scared of them and you're a little concerned about blowback. And so I don't know how they do it in the UK, but here in America, God forbid, no one in power, almost no one in power ever gets investigated unless they pissed off the establishment.
All right, when we come back from the break, pretty huge expose on Hassan Minhaj in the New Yorker. Has he been fabricating stories for career advancement and enrichment? Well, we'll give you the details and you decide for yourselves. We'll be right back.
All right, lots of comments here as always. Screed Hart writes in, look at these rich men and it took forever to bring charges against them. It takes forever for people to listen. And by the way, that could be the explanation. It could be super simple, which is that no, these women have been saying it for all these years and nobody was willing to go forward. No one was willing to investigate someone who was rich and powerful, etc. So thank you for making that point. Greg Javert also writes in with a great point, which is something similar to what Anna said. When you're 32 and you pick up your girl from high school, something is horribly wrong. So in Britain, they can't charge him for that because 16 is legal, okay? That doesn't mean you should pick up a 16-year-old. That's a little crazy. Like when you have to give her a script on how to get permission from her parents to come see you, don't do it. That's just not close. There's no need for it. It's crazy. Okay, now on to other issues. Also YouTube super members. Teddy, I just made up super members. That's fun. Well, I guess at the premium level and the executive producer level, you could be considered super members. Teddy Cool wrote in, Anna did well against Ben in that debate. She did so good, I decided to start watching the Young Turks and I haven't looked back.
That's amazing.
Wow,
thank you.
That's perfect. That's amazing. Yes.
What was the person's name?
Teddy Cool.
Teddy, thank you for having an open mind and giving me a shot.
Yeah. So number one, thank you, Anna, for going on those shows and making great points.
You're welcome, Jay.
Okay, etc. And number two, Teddy Cool. The thing I want to thank you for is having an open mind. That's. If I could just have everyone have an open mind and then hear us out, hear Shapiro out, hear out anyone you want, we're all good. We're all good. We're gonna win that all day, every day, okay? Lucy Smith writes in, oh my God, Jane, you have a book? Why don't you just tell us?
How, yeah.
She wrote an LOL, but we were already all LOLing. Lucy, that's funny, yes, but I'm glad you mentioned it, tyt.com/justice. And so, but there it is. And by the way, if you want, I can't believe it's this week. I can't believe it's tomorrow. I can't believe it. It's been so long. And you can right-wingers and fake lefters and all that. They have all these conspiracy theories about the book, so you get to see for yourself, okay, what's in the book. They think that I waited, this was one of my favorites, that I waited a long time so that ChatGPT can write the rest of the book.
Obviously, yes.
I think that's hilarious. Anyways, this Friday in New York, you can see me there, Powerhouse Arena, tyt.com/events to come to that this Friday at 7 o'clock. But if you can't make it, super cool news is that C-SPAN's Book TV is going to cover it, so you'll be able to see it on Book TV later, okay? Now, back to Trump. Norman Wilson wrote in, yay, someone finally said it, it's the money. It's the reason why he took the secret documents and the national secrets. And I am out of time. We'll do more next time. Back on TYT, Jen Canano with you guys. More news.
A new piece in the New Yorker exposes some of the, well, made up stories that comedian Hasan Minhaj has used in his career, especially during his specials and his stand-up specials. Now, the expose in the New Yorker discovers that his personal experiences, specifically with xenophobia and racism, are pretty much just like made up, and he confesses that they're made up. So I'm gonna start with that confession so we get that out of the way before we detail what he has lied about. So in Minhaj's approach to comedy, he really leans heavily on his own experience as an Asian American and Muslim American, okay? He tells stories of law enforcement entrapment and personal threats that he's received. Now, Minhaj, though, has acknowledged for the first time that many of the anecdotes he related in his Netflix specials were untrue. Still, he said that he stood by his work, and he's quoted as saying, every story in my style is built around a seed of truth. My comedy, Arnold Palmer, is 70% emotional truth, this happened, and then 30% hyperbole, exaggeration, fiction. Okay.
So, in other words, literally none of it is true.
So we're gonna get to specific examples in a moment, but look, there's a difference between a comedian who doesn't lean into like social justice related stuff. Like when you think of someone like Jon Stewart, for instance, right? He considered himself a comedian, but when he was the host of The Daily Show, his comedy relied on factual stories, events. Like he used those real life stories that actually happened to build off his comedy and to also make a point. And that's what Hasan Minhaj does with his specials, right? He leans on actual, we all thought he would lean on actual life experiences to make a political point in a comedic nature about what the country is grappling with in regard to these issues. Now, with that said, let's start with one of the lies that he told. So it's a story about a guy named Brother Eric, okay? It was a white man who converts to Islam and attends the mosque that Hasan Minhaj's family goes to in Sacramento. So this guy ends up being an FBI informant. This is what he details, one of the anecdotes he details. Now, years later, while watching the news with his father, Minhaj saw a story about Craig Montiel, who assumed the cover of a personal trainer when he became an FBI informant in Muslim communities in Southern California. Note, Southern California. Sacramento is in Northern California. And he says, well, Papa, look who it is. Minaj recalls telling his father, it's our good friend, brother Eric. So he makes it seem as though this FBI informant that had infiltrated Muslim communities actually infiltrated the mosque he and his family was attending in Sacramento. But that's actually not the case. Montiel, AKA brother Eric, had told me that Minaj's story is a fabrication. Quote, I have no idea why he would do that, end quote. Montalé was in prison in 2002 and didn't begin to work for the FBI on counterterrorism measures until 2006. Details of his undercover actions were cataloged in a legal case that has made its way to the Supreme Court. Montalé said that he'd worked only in Southern California, not in the Sacramento area, okay? So basically the brother Eric story that Minaj told was based on a hard foul he received during a game of pickup basketball in his youth, according to the New Yorker. Claire Malone is the writer here. Minaj and other teenage Muslims played pickup games with Middle Eastern men whom the boys suspected were actually FBI informants. But his recounting of brother Eric, totally made up.
Yeah, look, you want to do a set that's not attached to reality at all, and you're just joking. Well, that's the point of a comic. Nobody's gonna nitpick that, right? You want to pretend that it's true. Now we're having a different conversation, right? And then you want to layer on top of that. Well, okay, it isn't true, but it's emotional truth. No, the emotional. Another word for emotional truth is lie. Didn't happen, and I made up a phrase called emotional truth so that it's not factually true, it's emotionally true. Which, by the way, MAGA could say about a lot of things. No, and imagine if they said it, would we be like, no, it's okay. It was emotionally true that Trump took home the documents just as memoirs.
They're just alternative facts, Jing.
Yeah.
No, this is, by the way, in my opinion, that was one of the more tame lies that he's told. But what I want people to understand, as long as, or at least when it comes to my point of view on all of this, when big name public figures paint an inaccurate picture of reality, they sow paranoia and all sorts of negative thoughts in the minds of Americans about what this country is and what they might likely experience if they're out in the real world, right? And I don't think that's helpful in any way. But let me continue. So then there's this anthrax scare that he lied about, okay? So according to Claire Malone, during one of his specials, the big screen displays threatening tweets that were sent to Minaj. Most disturbing, he tells the story of a letter sent to his home, which was filled with white powder. The contents accidentally spilled onto his young daughter. The child was rushed to the hospital. It turned out not to be anthrax, but it's a sobering reminder that Minaj's comedic actions have real world consequences. Later that night, his wife, in a fury, told him that she was pregnant with their second child. You get to say whatever you want on stage, and we have to live with the consequences, Minaj recalls her saying. I don't give a crap that Time magazine thinks you're an influencer. If you ever put my kids in danger again, I will leave you in a second. So the problem with that anecdote is that it never happened, okay?
Jesus.
So the New York reporter reaches out to the New York Police Department. They have no record of the incident whatsoever, okay? Nor do any of the area hospitals. Because remember, he claims that he took his daughter to the hospital immediately. Front desk and mailroom employees at Minaj's former residence don't remember such an incident. Nor do Patriot Act, that was one of his specials, employees involved in the show's security or Minaj's security guard from that time. Okay, Minaj admitted that his daughter had never been exposed to white powder and that she hadn't been hospitalized. He had opened up a letter delivered to his apartment and it had contained some sort of powder. Now, some more details on that. Minaj said that he had made a joke to his wife saying, what if this was anthrax? He said he'd never told anyone on the show about this letter, despite the fact that there were concerns for his security at the time and that Netflix had hired protection for Minaj. So if the situation is that dire, where you're worried about your safety, where even Netflix is worried about your safety, and they've provided you security as a result of that, really you wouldn't tell the show's producers that you got a letter with white powder in it?
Yeah, no, this is terrible, guys. It's got a number of problems. Number one is the lies and the absurd excuses. Number two is this is crying wolf, and it doesn't help on racial issues. It hurts in both directions, because number one, non-minorities stop believing minorities when they say that this kind of stuff happens, because they go, oh yeah, here we go again. Just Jussie Smollett, Rachel Dolezal, Hassan Minaj. People making things up one after another after another. Now the reality is the people who make it up are a tiny percentage of the actual cases, right? But when they're famous, it makes it seem like they're a giant percentage. And so it is super damaging to cry wolf. And the other thing that it does is it makes everybody hate each other.
Totally.
Right? And look, if it really happened, and you want to be part of how to fight back and how to heal afterwards and all that, great, that's wonderful, okay? But if it didn't happen and you're just saying it so that people get angrier at each other and you could profit off of that in one way or another, that's disgusting.
So
I have one more, but go ahead.
So I saved what I think is one of the worst lies for last, because it actually had a negative impact on a real life individual that he lied about, and her family, by the way. So look, he basically lied about an experience he had in high school. He had a crush on a white student, white girl in his class. He asked her to prom, she allegedly says yes. But then she basically stands him up because he alleged that her parents were like basically racist and didn't want her to be photographed with a brown guy, right? He's Indian, he's Muslim. And so he recounts this story. He even, during his special, uses a photo of her with her face blurred out. But people were able to identify who she is. And she starts getting all sorts of threats for years. And it's like whack-a-mole, trying to take down like threads and forums, basically lying about her and her family. By the way, ended up getting engaged to an Indian guy, okay? So he admitted to lying about this stuff, but apparently has like no remorse over the impact you had on a specific individual that you went to high school with and lied about.
Yeah.
No, it's so disgusting. It's so disgusting.
And so that story is particularly egregious. I mean, you could get her into trouble, you can get her parents into trouble. That's just a terrible thing to do, right? So guys, let's keep it real here. There's one thing that no one is talking about in regards to this, at least not in the mainstream and not on the left, which is that, yeah, there's some thirst for some sort of victimhood. It gives you some degree of credibility.
It's good for your career.
Yeah, and it creates attention, it creates sympathy, etc. Now, no real victim ever pretends to be a victim because they know how terrible it is to be a victim. The people who have not been victimized are the ones that pretend, right? Because they think it's cool or it gives them credibility. And by the way, it's not made like that sense is not made up. It is in the zeitgeist. And so I hear, like, I'm honest with you guys about everything. So I've said in the past, like when I grew up in New Jersey, I actually didn't face that much discrimination. I had a funny name, I was from Turkey, they made some gobble gobble jokes, but I walk into Italian pizzerias and they say, hey, paisan, and everybody thought I was Italian in New Jersey, etc. So, but it got worse after 9/11 and after Trump. You give the context, right? But because of that, I mean, I heard back from a friend that someone in the progressive movement thought I wasn't brown enough. Now, what is that? That's maniacal, right?
It's so stupid. It's stupid.
And
that's
so,
what that is.
But that mindset is what leads to people like Hassan Minaj going, oh yeah? Oh yeah. No, I am brown enough. I am Muslim enough. I got discriminated against this time and that time and the other time.
No, what's amazing, Cenk, is even after he was exposed through the story, he is not apologetic at all, okay? So going back to the girl he went to high school with, the woman disputed certain facts. She told me, the reporter, she turned down Minaj, who was then a close friend in person days before the dance. Minaj acknowledged that this was correct, but he said that the two of them had long carried different understandings of her rejection. And here's what he says after that. As a brown kid in Davis, California, he said, he'd been conditioned to put his head down and just take it, and I did. The emotional truth of the story he told on stage was resonant and justified the fabrication of details. There are so many other kids who have had a similar sort of doorstep experience, he said. Yeah, but you didn't experience that. And the classmate that you dragged through the mud for your career is now suffering the consequences of your lies as you're celebrating. You won like a Peabody Award.
Come
on.
God, that frustrates me.
Come on.
So look, I asked that a girl for junior prom in like 8th grade or whatever the hell we called it back then. And she said, no, I never once thought it's because I'm Muslim and she's racist or bigoted. No, it was because I was probably chubby and not cool enough. Okay, like you don't have to turn everything racial. And there's plenty of things that are racial. And now when people say true things, then people are gonna, oh yeah, like Hassan Minaj and Smollett and all the rest of them. And guys, I'm tired of this nonsense that's also in the culture of, well, it doesn't really have to be true. It's just.
No, it has to be.
No, it does. There is no such thing as emotional truth. That's not a thing. Truth is truth. Emotional truth is I lied because my emotions wanted me to lie. That's even worse, okay? So yes, guilty.
All right, we got to take our final break. When we come back, more news, more fun. Don't miss it.
All right, back on TYT, let's start with Super Chat. Norma Sanchez says, justice came for me, and I love it. Okay, everybody's writing in about this. They're starting to come in. Gideon Carpentier wrote in, I just pre-ordered your book on Audible. Appreciate you, Gideon. Mikey3343 said, just bought Justice Coming at my local Barnes & Noble in New Jersey. It was the last copy they had on the shelf. Is that a bestseller, I see? I don't know, but I love that you guys are already buying them for Barnes & Noble and they're selling out and having to pre-order. That's just amazing. And who knows, maybe that was a Barnes & Noble I used to go to in New Jersey. I don't know what part you were in, but that's awesome. Hal Blair, you wrote in, by the way, it might be the same Barnes & Noble that I used to drop off Haas at all the time, and he would read the anime and other things that they had there. So anyways, Hal Blair, you writes in, I'm so excited for the release of Justice Coming tomorrow. I bought the physical book so I can start a conversation with fellow TYT fans. Fingers crossed. I also have a Cenk, of course, shirt and the Anna holiday sweater. I also have both of those.
I look super hot on that sweater, I'm not gonna lie. No, it's like the best depiction of me ever.
ShopTYT.com for that one. All right, let's go to YouTube members. On a different issue, Carmen Mercado wrote in about abortion, saying, I didn't know I was pregnant with my first 2 children until way after the 6 weeks due to irregular periods all my life. You're not alone. Tons of people don't know. That's why they're trying to make it 6 weeks so that it actually outlaws all abortions. Now let me go to Twitch. El Diablo wrote in, pre-ordered this book last night after hearing about it for so long. I'm so excited to finally read it. Thank you. I hope it delivers for you guys. Metal Turtle 571 gifted 5 subs on Twitch and is awesome. Camp Corona Dad in our member section wrote in, tomorrow, justice fulfilled. Okay, well, by the way, the justice doesn't get fulfilled until we win and we pass laws that help you in your life. That's what justice is about. It isn't about us. Salty T said, and I can't wait until a year from now when Cenk is saying, remember last year at this time when I had a bestseller book? Okay.
That'll probably be when I'm on my sabbatical working on my book. I'm ready to cash in on that, Uyghur. Get ready.
Good. And Navinix writes in, and a book title suggestion, Charlie and the No Cookie Factory. Okay.
Oh, that would be a happy book.
Okay.
He likes to give cookies to everybody, though. He's a sweet dog.
He is. Dragon with a Girl Tattoo writes in, tomorrow morning will be the dawn of justice. I like that. Connie 125 wrote in, just got an email that the book has been shipped. Yeah, I mean, I did this pre-order like 3 years ago. Connie, I'm so sorry it took so long. Thank you for ordering it back then. You're amazing.
He had to wait for ChatGPT to write it.
Dragon with a Girl Tattoo writes in, I'll donate a copy of Cenk's book to whatever person's library Trump gets sent to. I like that idea a lot. TYT.com/justice to do just that and order for anyone you like. Back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys, news.
All right. Recently, Jake Tapper spoke to Republican presidential candidate Mike Pence on his show State of the Union, and he touched on the issue of the striking auto workers. Shockingly, Jake Tapper did not take the side of the employer in this case. He was defending the workers, and he asked Mike Pence, well, pretty important question about what the CEOs are making versus what the workers are getting paid. He specifically called out GM CEO Mary Barra's absurd compensation. Let's take a look at how Mike Pence handled the question.
You blamed the strike on President Biden's policies. Most Americans, 75% according to Gallup, support the strikers. As a general principle, do you think it's fair that the CEO of General Motors makes 362 times what a typical GM employee makes?
Well, let me say what I don't think is fair is that Joe Biden has put forward an economic agenda from the very outset that launched the worst inflation in 40 years. I mean, literally, the cost of living has gone up almost 17% since we left office.
Yeah, okay, Robot. We're not asking about Bidenomics. We're not asking about Joe Biden. We're asking about a very specific issue. Mary Barra's absurd over $20 million compensation in 1 year versus what the workers are getting paid. And you know what? Credit to Jake Tapper because he did not allow Mike Pence to deflect. He followed up. Let's watch.
There's also this issue of general fairness. In 1965, during this era of the great middle class expansion in the United States, CEOs made about 20 times what their typical workers made. But as I noted to you, the CEO of GM makes 362 times what her typical employees make. I just want to make sure I get an answer from you. Is that okay? Do you think that's fair?
Well, I think that ought to be left to the shareholders of that company. I'm somebody that believes in free enterprise. I think those are decisions that can be made by shareholders and creating pressure, and I'll fully support how these publicly traded companies operate.
All right, Cenk, so what do you think? First of all, I'm very curious what you think about Jake Tapper's handling of that interview, because I think I don't want to say he's on a bit of a redemption arc, but he has been handling interviews a little better lately.
Yeah.
But also, what do you think about Mike Pence's answer?
Yeah, I think Jake Tapper's on a little bit of a journalism arc. No, nice job again by Jake Tapper. So look, guys, it's not personal for us. So you've seen me get mad at Jake Tapper. You've seen me compliment Jake Tapper. Doesn't it depend all the time? Unfortunately, for a lot of other folks, they catch feelings and then they make it personal. So here, Jake Tapper does a great job of doing a follow-up question, asking the right question, good framing on it. And he explains, look, 75% of the American people are on the workers' side, which makes sense because they're workers, right? And so, and maybe they've started to catch on at CNN. Your audience might also be the average American and not the super powerful and elite. But either way, I'll take it. Great questions, great follow-up. So on Mike Pence, man, you know, all that evangelical stuff is just cover for him being a corporate robot. Did you notice what he said at the end? You know, he said, I fully support these public corporations. Yeah, we know, brother. Yeah, So, and by the way, he doesn't mean I support the corporations as in I support all of the stakeholders in the corporation, the workers, the executives, etc. No, he means I support the people in charge of the corporations.
And the shareholders.
Right, and the shareholders, but not the workers, because you had an opportunity, every opportunity to say, oh, damn right, I support the average American worker, but we'll get to a negotiated conversation. Easy ways you could have even deflected the question. He didn't even deflect it. In fact, he said, the first part of the answer was, Jake, I believe in free enterprise. In other words, no, I do not support the workers. And as I wrote about in Justice is Coming, the Powell memo back in 1971 explained, do not say you're in favor of the Chamber of Commerce and corporations. Say you're in favor of freedom. And here it is all these decades later, and that's exactly what Mike Pence is doing.
Weird how his anti-abortion, pro-corporation messaging hasn't really worked out so well for him in the Republican primary. Strange. Anyway, bonus episode is next, tyt.com/join. We'll see you there.
Every day, the Young Turks delivers 2 hours of solid, fact-based, timely news and progressive commentary on all the day's most important stories. We keep our viewers informed while also providing perspective and insight on the news we cover, so you understand not only